Imagine a room where you smell hot plastic and hear the quiet rumble of a small engine that never stops. In front of you is a box with parts, wires, and bulbs that just don't want to work the way you want them to. And you understand, today everything you've been working on for months could disappear, your dream could be shattered. But at the same time, something incredible is being born here. Hi, I'm Chuck Hull, and I want to tell you the story of how I invented 3D printing. This isn't just a story about a machine or a technology. This is a story about faith, about perseverance, about moments when the whole world tells you, it won't work, and you keep going. I'll show you how a small idea turned into a global revolution in manufacturing, how failures turned into lessons, and risks turned into victories. And if you listen to the end, you'll learn lessons that you can apply to your own life, because true success isn't just about inventions, it's about having the courage to act despite everything. There will be moments in this story when I was pushed around, colleagues laughed at my prototypes, managers said I was wasting my time, the printing press broke down at the most critical moment. But it was these crises that taught me to believe even more, to look for new ways, and to never give up. So take a deep breath. Imagine yourself standing next to me in this little workshop, and let me show you how the future is born. Because everything you see now in a world where you can print almost anything started with that little noise, that smell, and that belief that knew no bounds. I remember that day like it was yesterday. I was standing in my little workshop, surrounded by a box of plastic, wires, parts, blinking lights, and I thought, maybe this will never work. It was all so simple and yet so incredibly complex. But I felt something that I couldn't put into words, the feeling that this idea would change everything. My dream was very simple, to create a machine that could print any object, layer by layer. No inventing, no hand sculpting, just telling the machine, do this, and it would create an exact copy. I called it stereolithography, and to me it sounded like magic. The first prototype looked ridiculous. The box, the motors, the truckload of wires, everything buzzes, shakes and barely works. I tried to print a small part for a lamp, and it burst in the third minute. The plastic melted, the part fell into small pieces, and I stood there and watched it in silence. Immediately, doubts arose from those around me. My colleagues asked with laughter, "Why do you need this? It's impossible." I was overcome with sadness, but at the same time excitement pulsed in my chest. Because I knew that if I gave up now, I would never know what could have been. I began to experiment, again and again. Every day was a struggle, engines broke, parts did not fit, someone from my environment mocked. But there was something else. Every time a small detail was successful, I felt an explosion of emotions. It wasn't just work, it was the feeling that you were creating the future with your own hands. A small success, and I had faith that one day I would be able to print not only small details, but also something much larger. Then I began to understand that this was not just a machine or a technology. This was my fight for a dream, for the belief that you can change the world with one simple principle: if you can imagine it, you can create it. And it was that little noise of the motor, the smell of hot plastic, and endless attempts that was the spark that ignited the entire future of 3D printing. I realized that the hardest part was not having the printer break or the parts not work. The hardest part was convincing people that your idea mattered. Colleagues laughed, managers rolled their eyes, and investors said, "This is a waste of time." I stood in a dimly lit room, staring at my broken part that never worked. A storm raged inside me, self-doubt, fear that it was all for nothing. But that was when the turning point came. I decided, if they don't believe it, that's their problem. I started experimenting at night, when no one was looking. Every sound of the little engine, every smell of hot plastic, became a reminder that I was moving in the right direction. I break, they laugh, and I keep going anyway. I remember one meeting when my boss threw my prototype across the table and said, "You're wasting your time." For anyone else, that would have been a crushing blow. But for me, it was fuel. I decided that if I gave up, no one would ever know how great this invention could be. I started thinking outside the box: new materials, different ways to heat plastic, more precise motors. Every failure became a lesson, and every mistake a step toward the future. Then I met other enthusiasts, people who also believed that 3D printing would change manufacturing. Together we worked nights, laughed at failures, and celebrated small victories. These were the first steps forward, when even a small part that finally held together became a symbol of hope. In those moments, I realized one simple thing: the real fight is not against a machine, not against a material, but against people who doubt your dream. And it was these crises that shaped me as an inventor and a leader. Because belief in your own idea is stronger than any ridicule. And then, after months of nightly experiments, broken parts, and hundreds of attempts, I saw the result for the first time. A small, tiny part printed by my first printer remained intact. It was far from perfect, but for me it was an explosion of emotions. I remember the smell of hot plastic, the roar of the engine that seemed to laugh with me, and the quiet joy that permeated the entire room. The first customers were small companies and enthusiasts who believed in my idea. Together we tested materials, adjusted settings, and each new successful detail became proof: it works. The world slowly began to notice us, but still did not fully understand what was happening. I remember my first time speaking to a small audience at a tech conference. My heart was pounding, my hands were shaking, but when the printer started printing the first object right in front of people, the room fell silent. Then came the applause, the smiles, the curious looks. It was a small victory, but to me it meant more than any award. In those moments, I realized that perseverance is more important than talent. Every defeat, every broken part brought me here. The small workshop was turning into a laboratory of dreams. And although the path was still long, the first success gave me wings. This small victory taught me something important: even in the darkest moments, when everything seems hopeless, it's worth keeping working. Because that's when a true miracle is born. A few years after the first small successes, I realized, small victories are no longer enough. The world began to notice 3D printing, and new challenges appeared. Patents, competitors, skeptics, everyone wanted to either copy my idea or stop me. Every step forward turned into a fight. I sat in the lab at night, reviewing blueprints and testing new materials. We discovered stereolithography, a method that allowed us to create parts with greater precision. Every piece of plastic I held in my hands, every test layer that formed on the printer, seemed like a small miracle. But behind it were months of failure, when nothing worked. A scene I'll never forget: a meeting with investors where I could feel their eyes piercing me. One of them said sharply, "This will never be commercially successful. You're wasting your money and your time." Pain shot down my spine, but I took a deep breath and replied, "You may not see it, but we're changing the future of manufacturing." That's when a new strategy emerged. We started thinking bigger than just improving the printer: what parts could be printed, what materials would change the industry, how to make the technology accessible to others. A change in team leadership, new rules, new partners, all of this transformed our small lab into an unstoppable movement. The struggle was tough. Competitors tried to patent our ideas earlier, part of the team had doubts, printheads broke at the most critical moment. But each crisis taught us to be stronger, faster, and more inventive. This stage showed me an important thing: technology is just a tool. A true miracle is born where faith meets perseverance. When you are willing to take risks and not be afraid of failure, then even a small idea can change the world. I remember the day everything changed. I was standing at a large conference, and there were dozens of eyes around me, watching my printer create its first complex part right before people's eyes. It was quiet, except for the rumble of the engine, rhythmically echoing through the large hall, and I felt. It was the moment when the small workshop and my nightly experiments became something that everyone could see. When the first object, which had previously disappeared into a multitude of failures, emerged intact and precise, the room erupted in applause. People came up to touch it, asked, "Is this real?" And I smiled, because I knew this was just the beginning. After that demonstration, the world started to pay attention. Journalists, investors, industrial giants, everyone wanted to know how it worked. We received the first serious orders, partnerships, and even international recognition. The technology, which was previously laughed at and called a waste of time, is now starting to change the industry. But with success came new challenges. We had to scale production, develop new materials, protect patents, and at the same time not lose the spirit of ingenuity that made everything possible. Every day was a new challenge, and it was they that made us stronger. That moment of global breakthrough showed me that true faith and perseverance can change the world. That even when the whole world doubts, if you move forward, you can create a revolution. And that's when I realized, a small workshop, the roar of an engine, and the smell of hot plastic, these were the beginnings of a great future that had already become a reality. When the technology entered the international arena, I thought that everything would be easy now. But the reality turned out to be completely different. Suddenly, competitors appeared, trying to copy our printers, reduce the price, bypass patents. Every day was a new challenge: how to stay first, how not to lose control of your idea, how to continue innovating without burning out from the workload. I remember a meeting when the whole team was sitting in the lab, eyes tired, hands dirty with plastic, and I was trying to find a solution to scale production. One of the partners said sharply, "We can't keep up. If we don't change our approach, we'll be passed over." It was difficult. The fear of losing what we had worked on for years weighed on everyone. But it was in these crises that the best solutions were born. We revised processes, introduced new materials, improved engines to work more precisely and reliably. Every failure became a lesson: adapt quickly, look for an alternative, don't be afraid to take risks. There were nights when I sat alone in the lab, staring at the little printer, and it felt like the world was against me. But then I remembered where it all began: the smell of hot plastic, the roar of the engine, the first small part that had withstood all the tests. And I knew, if we could get here, we could overcome any problem. This period taught me the most important thing: a true leader is born in a crisis. Not when everything is going smoothly, but when the whole world around is in doubt, and only faith and perseverance help move forward. Today, 3D printing is not just a lab or a small printer in a workshop. It's in hospitals printing prosthetics for children, in factories creating complex parts for airplanes and cars, even in space programs printing tools for astronauts. Every day I see how a technology that was once laughed at is saving lives and changing the world. I remember the moment a boy came into our lab with a prosthetic arm printed on our printer. His eyes were shining with joy. He was gently touching his fingers, and I realized that everything we had been through, every broken part, every sleepless night, had meaning. It was a momentary victory over the doubts and defeats that had haunted us for years. Technology has become a global force. Manufacturing has become flexible, fast, and personalized. People have started creating their own products, startups have flourished, and dreams that once seemed impossible have become reality. But along with this, new questions emerged: how to make technology accessible to everyone, how to maintain quality on a global level, how not to lose the spirit of innovation on the scale of a large business. These were challenges, but they were no longer scary, they were inspiring. Because I knew that a small workshop, the smell of plastic, the first defeats and small victories taught us to overcome any difficulties. And every time I see someone pick up a printer and create something of their own, I realize, our work is not just about technology. It's about faith, about perseverance, and that even the wildest dreams can be realized if you're not afraid to move forward. Sometimes I wonder how it all started with a small printer in a dark workshop and the smell of hot plastic. And now I imagine that tomorrow 3D printing can do things that just a few years ago seemed like fantasy. We're talking about printing houses, organs for people, tools for space stations, even on Mars. This is not just technology, it's the key to a new world. I remember the night we first printed a prototype for a space mission. The silence of the lab, the rumble of the little motor, and the light from the lamp reflecting off the plastic part, it was like magic. I stood there thinking, if we can do this here on Earth, imagine what we can do tomorrow. The future of 3D printing is freedom. The freedom to create without limits, to think big, and to realize even the most daring ideas. Sometimes I feel like we're just getting started. Every new project, every new detail is another step towards a world where the only limits are in the imagination. This dream inspires me every day. It makes me not stop, take risks, look for new paths and not be afraid of falling. Because every fall is a lesson, and every success is a reward for faith and perseverance. And I know that the future is even brighter than any dreams we had at the beginning. After years of struggle, defeats, and small victories, the moment came when the whole world began to notice what we had created. I received letters from inventors, entrepreneurs, students, sending photos of their first 3D printed parts and writing, "You inspire us." It was like music to my ears, confirmation that all our sleepless nights, all the broken parts, and the mockery. The first awards, international recognition, magazine articles, all of these were nice. But what I appreciated most were the moments when I saw how technology really changed people's lives. Children with prosthetics, startups creating unique products, space programs, all of this was the result of our faith and perseverance. I will never forget the moment when I was greeted with applause at a big conference, and colleagues who had previously doubted my idea came up to me and sincerely said, "You're a game changer." I stood there, feeling every beat of my heart, and thought, everything we've been through, all the mistakes and risks, has brought us here. This stage taught me the most important thing: recognition comes to those who don't give up, who believe in their dream, even when everyone around them doubts it. And most importantly, success is not only in awards or money, but in the ability to inspire others, open new horizons, and make the world a better place. I want you to understand, this story is not just about me or 3D printing. It's about each of us. That true success is the courage to change, move forward, and create something new, despite all the defeats and doubts. When I look at the world, where people are printing houses, organs, prosthetics, tools for space, I see proof that believing in a dream and perseverance can change reality. And if you are willing to do the same, your own story can be a revolution too. Because success is not just about invention, not just about awards. It is the courage to move forward, to create and inspire, even when the whole world doubts. And that is what makes us the true creators of our future.